All right, good morning and welcome to Houston Techfest 2020 Virtual Edition. Before we get started, I'd like to make sure everyone knows about the Q&A feature. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the presentation screen, you ought to see a question mark icon. Click on that and feel free to post questions anytime. I, the moderator, will handle your questions. And Claudio will have some time in the middle of the presentation, at the end of the presentation, to answer them. Just want to let you guys know that Code Magazine is giving everyone a free subscription. There is a link inside the Q&A where you can find that to sign up. And without any further ado, we are proud to present Claudio Lasala from Improving, who will be giving an introduction to Scrum. Claudio.
All right, thanks, Walton. Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday morning. I totally appreciate you taking your time. I know that I'm always like 2 clicks away from the internet, so I hope to, keep you engaged here, making your time worth joining us this morning. So welcome to this talk, which is my Beyond the Daily Stand-Up, an intro to Scrum. And let me get my clicker thingy going. There we go. My email is up there. If at any point in time, in the future, you need to reach out to ask me questions or, have a deeper conversation on topics that I have here during this talk, or you also have my business card up there. I'm a technical director with Improving. I work off of the Houston office, and I've been writing software for 25 plus years, something like that. And in my business card there, you see all the areas of passion. So if there's anything you see on my business card that you feel like, oh, I'd like to talk about that. So, just reach out. I'll definitely make your ears bleed through any of those topics. And yeah, I do love playing music. And yeah, I do love going fast at a racetrack. That's what keeps me sane. We are having virtual training courses at Improving since, of course, ever since the pandemic started, we switched over all of our training courses to a virtual format, which actually become very famous. People are really enjoying it, the way that our trainings are conducting those courses, the tools that we're using to make it interactive as engaging as possible. So if you're attending Techfest, you can use the Tech-Fest-2020 code to get a 500% off, $500 off of the list price for our Scrum trainees, for Scrum Masters, for product owners. So definitely check it out. We are hiring across pretty much all of our offices. These are the main positions that we currently have. You can send a resume to careers@improving.com. Make sure to put a reference to the closest office to you. We're up to actually 14 offices now across North America. Entonces, ahora hablamos español también. And this is how far, as far as I'm going to go, because I'm still working on my Spanish. And you have there a list of all the offices. So make sure to just put a reference there. You may also want to put a reference to say, hey, I heard this from Claudio at his talk, so that's going to give you extra points. Just joking about that. We also have weekly lunch and learns that are free. You can just sign up. You go to our improving.com/virtual events website, and you can see a list of all the upcoming lunch and learns that we have on a variety of topics related to Scrum, Agile, software development, Java, .NET. We're all over the map with topics. You can also check the link there to our YouTube page to see all of the videos for all of the previous lunch and learns. There's a bunch of them, so make sure to check it out. And let's get on going with the main talk here. So the idea about this talk, yes, it's an intro to Scrum, right? And I mean, Scrum has been around for quite some time now. You're probably already doing at least some of the Scrum ceremonies. So what I would like to go over here is also making it interesting to people who are doing what we call the Scrum Butt adopters, which are the folks who are like, oh yeah, we do this stand-up, but we don't do sprint planning. Or, oh yeah, we do sprint planning, but we don't do sprint retro. So you're not really doing Scrum, right? You're adopting some of the ceremonies that we have in Scrum, but you're not going like full in, observing all of the ceremonies and why they are important, right? It's not just going through the motions, but understanding why we have those ceremonies. And I'll share some of my own experiences with you. So the way I've learned, the way I've been practicing, the things that have worked for me, the things that have not worked for me. Now, it doesn't mean that, you know, what worked for me is going to work for you. It's just sharing my experiences because you may relate to some of them, and then, you know, just take whatever makes sense to you, right? So daily stand-ups, which actually, if you go by the book, we should say daily scrum, right? Like, that's the proper term, because not necessarily people have to stand up during that meeting. I choose to do so because just this is how I am. I'm more energetic like that. I feel like, you know, standing up and talking with my hands a lot. But think about your daily scrum, right? So are people sitting down, right? Even though, you know, a lot of people say, well, let's go to our daily stand-up. And then they're all sitting down. It's like, well, wait a minute, right? Are you aware of why we have this meeting? Are people holding a mug of coffee or their favorite drink of choice? Are they staring at their computers, right? There's way more than 10 people in the room, and the meeting is lasting for like 45 minutes or longer. You really don't do daily stand-up or daily scrum, right? And the reason why I bring that up is because many times I've gone out to clients who work with them, say for a week, to give some agile coaching, and then I anticipate daily stand-ups, right, or their daily scrums as a fly on the wall, just to see how they are doing. And that's what I see, right? They call it a stand-up, so I'm thinking, okay, if they're calling it a stand-up, it's because they're going to get in the room, you know, standing up, give their, you know, have their quick conversation, and then get out. But then no, I see everybody like pulling chairs, you know, sitting down comfortably, you know, with the little, you know, mug of coffee, and then everybody bringing their computers. I'm like, wait a minute, why are they bringing their computers in? And like, I've been in meetings like that where I've counted 30 people, like 30 people, and the meeting for sure took 45 minutes. Now, the funny thing was that they said, oh yeah, we do the daily stand-up thing, but we do it every other day. Like, wait a minute. You know, English is not my primary language, but I think daily means every day, not every other day, right? So it's the kind of thing where you think you are doing the thing, but you're just really going through the motions. It's like, okay, that's where people go every other day, and they carry their computers and they sit down and they talk for 45 minutes and nothing gets done, right? So when we think about software projects, you probably have worked on projects that look somewhat like the image here on the left or on the right. On the left, it's the kind of project that you're going to probably spend like 4 or 5 years just working on planning, trying to do all of your requirements gathering, trying to think of every single little scenario, and then 5 years down, you still haven't sat down to actually write any code. Or you may even have started building some code, but you've been like building, maybe you spent like 2 years doing planning and then 3 years coding, and never put that in front of real users. So you have no idea if that's going to work once you finally, you know, you ever do, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. The other is where you come into the office in the morning, or you start working in the morning nowadays, and you have no idea what you're going to be working on. You're always putting out fires, right? There's just no way for you to do any sort of planning, not even like a daily planning. Now, software projects, most of them should sit somewhere in the middle, right? We are not firefighters with software, right? At least the majority of us, I would guess. And we are also not building software that it's so huge that we have to spend like 5 years, you know, like 3 years just planning and, you know, the remaining time coding. Most of us don't work in projects like that, right? So Scrum allows us to better manage these projects that sit in between, right? It's not too long, not firefight mode type of thing. And everything you need to know about Scrum, it's on this image, right? So all the ceremonies, all the pieces that we have, their own this image. And during this talk, we're going to be going through some of the main points here. And then again, I'm going to be like spraying some of my own experience around it so that you see, because a lot of times, people see these presentations and they go through the motions, like by the book, but they don't say it like really how it works in real life. And it varies, right? Every company has different processes, has different people, different skill sets, different background experiences. So it changes vastly, right? So it's not like every single Scrum project will always be the same thing and it will always look the same. It's never like that, okay? So starting from the top there, the top left, right? So given that we have business case, financing, the scope, and the approach to a certain project, we have the contract signed off, we have the initial release plan, like, okay, within a year, we have this big thing coming up and we need to release the software by then, right? You have that understanding and you've assembled the team, then it kicks into like Scrum project gear, where you have a product owner, the person who's going to be establishing the vision, the person who knows what is the value of the thing that we are building, where are we aiming at, like, so the captain of the ship is a product owner. And the product owner will prioritize, right, establish the vision and prioritize the backlog from the bottom up, like get the big stones, put them at the bottom, and then put the smaller ones at the top. At the beginning of each iteration of work, and we're going to be talking about how long are those iterations, we're going to have sprint planning, where we define acceptance criteria, where the team forecasts, okay, how much work, how many of those user stories or units of work we are going to be taking on. And then we create tasks to define how do we plan on accomplishing those goals. We run sprints, right? And then typically you either have 1 to 4 week sprints. I've worked on teams that have been doing 1 week sprints. They are really short and real quick. It doesn't work for every project, right? It really depends on the maturity of the team and how often folks expect to have deliverables at the end of that iteration. 4 week sprints, I've worked on teams that have done that. I didn't like it very much. Fortunately, it didn't last long as a 4 week thing because it's too long of a feedback cycle. Like, you start doing something in week 1, by week 4, you have no idea what you did, on week 1. You just forget. It's just so long ago. So that feedback cycle, when you start like reflecting upon how the sprint worked, you already have lost context of everything. I've worked on 3 week sprints. It worked okay, right? And the reason why it was a 3 week, it was just a logistical issue because we had to bring people in from other cities to be in a place for the meetings. The one that has worked better for me has been the 2 week. It seems to be, for at least the majority of projects I've worked on, it's the one that gives folks time to like soak in, do like little design within the sprint, to work through the tasks, flush out details, run it by the product owner, make sure that it's all good, and then delivering something at the end of the sprint. But then again, it varies based on what the company is trying to accomplish. Within that period, right, the sprints, we have the daily Scrum, right? So ideally, it should last less than 15 minutes, right? You get together, and that's the thing, whether you're standing up or sitting down, it doesn't matter, right? What matters is it's something quick, right? It's a quick touch base to make sure that, we know what's going on, we know what everybody is up to, not as a controlling thing. It's like, what are you working on? What are you working on? It's more like, do you need anything to be successful today? Can I help you with anything? Oh, do you have any extra bandwidth because I need help? Can you help me? It's more along those lines. It's a collaborative effort. Usually at the daily Scrum, we update burn down charts. We're going to be talking about some of those as well. At the end of the sprint, we have two ceremonies, one called sprint review, where, well, we review the sprint. We review what we've built that sprint, and we do the retrospective to essentially reflect upon, okay, this is what we did, this is how it went. Is there anything we can do to make it better, right? To either move faster or to improve quality of what we're doing or improve the interactions that we have on the team to better use the capabilities of the team that we are working in. That's the time to do it. So again, we're going to be diving into every single one of those points as we go through this. I really like this this sentence that I do not know who came up with that way to explain it, but I totally love it. Scrum was not designed to solve your problems, it was designed to expose them, which was something that in the past we didn't quite have that. We would be like, doing requirements gathering, we would be designing and modeling and architecting solutions, and we would go on for a long time without knowing that we had a problem, right? And whatever that problem was, maybe, the thing that we were building, we were so like knee deep into the thing that we were trying to solve that we don't look up to make sure that we are going the proper way, right? And there's another quote that I like, which goes somewhat like, as long as you are going in the right direction, all you have to do is to keep pedaling, right? So yes, you have to pedal as hard as you can, but once in a while you have to look up and make sure that you're facing the right direction, you're going to the right direction. Otherwise, it's just effort that's going nowhere. And I like Scrum about exposing things as quickly as they happen so that we can take action on it. The parts of Scrum as far as roles, rules, and practice, actually spelling those out throughout the remaining of the story. There are 3 roles, right? Very simplified. Product owner, Scrum Master, development team. We're going to talk about each and every one of those. I like this image here because one common misconception is that people see product owners as the quote-unquote shield between the business and the development team, right? And that's very wrong. That's completely wrong, because that makes or encourages the behavior where the development team is going to be solely focused on the technical aspects of things. They're going to completely ignore, forget about, or put in like in the on the side the needs of the actual stakeholders, the real users, the real people who are going to be using the thing that they are building. So the idea of a product owner is, yes, to sit in front of the team, somewhat in between the team and the business, but just as a facilitator, right, to essentially sum up or consolidate what the stakeholders, the business need, and then putting it in a way to define that vision and prioritize to give the team direction, but it does not prevent the team from not necessarily like going around, but to going directly to like stakeholders to learn more about the business, learn more about why is it important that we do this thing here, right? How is that going to make your life more productive? How is it going to make you more effective? How is it going to bring value to your business or to your users, right? It shouldn't be the case, but that is like one of the main things that I see out there. Remember, product owners are not supposed to be a shield between business and development team. Not at all, okay? So, talking about them, single person representing the stakeholders and or the customers has a final authority, right, therefore accountability in creating and prioritizing the product backlog. That's the person who knows which are the most important things that we should be working on, right? So always follow that person. That, again, it's the captain of the ship. If there is an iceberg ahead of us, it's the product owner who's going to see that and relay that to the remaining of the team to say, okay, we need to make course corrections here. Product owner must be available to the development team at any time. This is another thing that I've seen in the wild where teams were failing because the product owner would be there for sprint planning, would essentially not really talk with the team. They would say, okay, these are the user stories. I want you to do this, 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 and this, and then I'm out for 2 weeks. I've seen that happening, right? Where pretty much the PO, the product owner, is dictating what and how the team is supposed to be accomplishing things, and they're out. And then during the sprint, I saw teams like having several questions because they didn't have a chance to talk during sprint planning, right? To ask questions and say, okay, I don't quite understand the value of this story or why we have to implement it this way, because you're telling me how I'm supposed to implement this, but I don't even understand why. And they couldn't ask that question. So comes the end of the sprints, they have to deliver the increments, and the product owner goes like, oh no, that's not at all what I meant. Well, yeah, you're not here to, talk with us. So that's pretty bad, right? So while the product owner does not have to be there working with the team, 24/7, the person has to be available as the team has questions that are blockers. It's like, okay, I don't know how to move forward. Where is the product owner? I need to ask questions. Because if that person is not available, another thing that I've seen is then developers go rogue and they start just making things up, right? They are writing code that shouldn't be there to begin with. But it's like, well, nobody was around to, answer questions. I'm going to just go and do my thing. Not the best thing, because at the end, it's going to cause rework. It's going to cause user stories getting rejected because, it doesn't do what the business actually needs. So that's a huge point about product owners. Also on that point, I have seen, notice that on the slide it says a single person representing the stakeholders and customers. I've seen cases where there were like 2 product owners for a product / project, and they thought that was working because like, oh yeah, we think the same, we're all on the same page, until they were not. So they would be like in sprint planning arguing with themselves while the team was sitting around thinking, okay, can you guys make up your mind? Apparently we don't have, a captain. We have 2 that are fighting at the command of this ship. So that doesn't quite work, right? The Scrum Master is a facilitator for the team and product owner. That's the person supposed to like clear roadblocks for the team. If roadblocks are expressed by the team, the Scrum Master is a person who's supposed to take the lead to make sure that the roadblocks are cleared. It doesn't mean that the Scrum Master is the person doing the work to remove the block, because maybe the person does not have maybe the technical skills to clear up a given roadblock. But the Scrum Master should be the one that's like, okay, I know that's a roadblock. I'm gonna go after the people, or I'm gonna go after whatever it means to get that resource and that's a roadblock cleared. The Scrum Master also sets up the tracking and reporting to see or to have visibility to how the team is doing during a sprint and during a release, right, or during the project, and also to enhance and make it possible to inspect how they're doing and adapt as needed. Scrum Master is also the person who's going to be making sure that the team understands the rules of Scrum, which are not that many. They're very few, but it's very easy for people to take them for granted or learn it at a Scrum course and then never really apply or not quite understand why those are rules that we should be like paying attention to. And it's the person who's like making sure that the team is agile. Scrum Masters are not project manager, right? The Scrum Master is not the person who's going to be standing behind the developers asking, are you done yet? Are you done yet? So what are you doing? What are you working on? Are you done yet? That's not what the Scrum Master is supposed to be. The Scrum Master is supposed to be a servant leader, right? The person is leading the group towards the value that you're trying to build, and it's making sure that the way is clear for the development team to come through, right? So supports the Agile principle, build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done, right? The development team, I really like this slide because it speaks to my musical background as well. Notice that in Scrum, we say the development team. We don't say the testers. We don't say the UX folks. Developers are Scrum developers. Whether the developer is a coder, somebody who's writing the code to implement the feature, whether the person is a tester, and whether that tester is running manual tests or writing automated tests, it doesn't matter. Maybe the person is a UI UX designer. The person is also developing the product, right? The person is developing the workflows, the frames, the ways to build the best implementation or the best deliverable to what the stakeholders actually need, right? DBAs, anybody involved with building that product, they're all part of the development team, and they should be cross-functional, right? Meaning, for example, there have been products or projects where I've played the product owner role, I've played the Scrum Master role, I've played the developer role, I've played all of them, and that has helped me tremendously because when I'm working on a team where I'm essentially a software developer, I can still effectively communicate with a product owner because I've played that role before. Or I can work with a Scrum Master and bounce ideas off each other because I've done that before. It's just knowing what other people do. Like as a software developer, I've walked up to a UX designer to ask, hey, why are we doing it that way? That does not make sense because of X, Y, and Z. But instead of saying it doesn't make sense from a technical background, I was flipping it around and thinking from a user standpoint. And the UX person was like, oh yeah, you're totally right. You should be a UX designer. Like, no, that's not what I'm bringing up here. It's just knowing at least, enough of everybody's main skill set so that we can better collaborate. And I draw that as a comparison to music, because for me, I'm originally a guitar player, but I can also play the drums, I can also play the bass, I can also write lyrics, I can also somewhat sing in my bathroom, right? But when I'm in a band situation, because I know a little bit of everything else, I can actually better communicate with the other members of the band. Same thing in a Scrum team. The more you know about the others' skills and the things that they do, the better you're going to communicate. Another case that I bring up is, as a software developer, a person who writes the code, I know how to automate things, including testing. So if I'm working with a traditional QA person who's used to only testing, running manual tests, I can teach that person to automate certain things. Because when we are sitting in a sprint planning session and we are sizing the story, and maybe the coders are going to size the story as a 3, but the QA person will say, oh no, that is an 11 for me. It's a huge story for me. Well, oh, come on, man, what's so hard about your work? Well, it should open up the conversation where the QA person will tell me, well, for you guys to put that button that when the user clicks, it's going to show this message, it's probably small work. But for me, it's a lot of work. Okay, why is that? Well, because I need to make sure that the database contains the following data, and I need to make sure that the following things are deployed where they have to be, whatever it is, and I do all of that manually. Well, okay, creating data, we can write scripts for that, right? Deploying things where they should go, yeah, we can automate that too. So collaborate, right? Do it, and then show how you do it and coach the other person into doing what you just did, right? That's how you grow a team together. And hence the idea of being cross-functional. Parts of the Scrum artifacts that we have, the two main things, product backlog. Product backlog is probably the most important artifact there. and the sprint backlog. Now, what are those? Or how do we work with those? I'm sorry. Sprint planning, the first thing, so the first day of the sprint, we are gonna split the sprint planning meeting into two parts. The first half, we essentially decide on what we are gonna be working on. So the product owner and the team will look through the backlog, look at the stories, the features that are at the top of the backlog, and then clarify the requirements with the product owner. Right, so essentially the product owner explains what the story is. Even more important, which a lot of people miss, why is it important? Why are we working on this user story here? What kind of value does it bring to the business, to the stakeholders, to the users, and so on? Explain that. Allow the team to ask questions if they are unclear on certain aspects of the stories. Define the acceptance criteria, right? When do we know that we are actually done with that story, right? The second half of that meeting is the how we are going to be implementing the stories or the features that we committed to, right? So using the acceptance criteria, we break each story or each work item down into smaller tasks. So it creates the sprint backlog. So the things that we need to do within this sprint. And it could be design oriented as well. So during tasking, we can have a little bit of like minimal design work so that the team can think through like the initial design of what they're going to be doing and then create the tasks out of that design. Some other Scrum artifacts that we use, burn ups and burn down charts. Burn up charts is for the project as a whole, so that we know if we are sizing things in terms of story points, right? We may say, well, the total product will be composed of 400 story points. So at the end of each sprint, we see how many points have we achieved, and we update that chart to see and make sure that we are burning up into our deliverables. The burn down is for a sprint itself. So at the beginning of the sprint, we see some people will measure that in different manners. Some people will measure it in terms of points, other in terms of hours. So for example, if we say, well, we have in this sprint 60 hours of work, for example, of course it should be way more, 60 hours. But first day of the sprint, we work 5, and then another 10, and then another 5. We just keep updating the charts, right, to show how we are burning that down. If we identify new tasks or if we resize existing tasks mid-sprint, we update the chart accordingly, right? So it could be where you start working on a task that you thought you would take you 4 hours, and then you're 2 hours in, you say, you know what, this is not a 4-hour task. I've just spent 2 hours on it, and I know there's still at least about 6 hours to go. Oh, but you said 4 hours. It doesn't matter what I said yesterday. Yesterday, I didn't know what I do know right now. Right now, this is my best assessment. So within a sprint, you should have the freedom to make these adjustments because you are learning through the sprint. And many times, if you do a pretty good job at planning, if all the questions are clarified, the accuracy of those tasks, they tend to go higher. When there are several questions, or when of those, do it cards on the board is like, oh, this, you just need to do it. That always makes me take a step back because that do it, it could be something that can take 8 hours, right? If you say, well, it's going to take me 8 hours, it could take 6. Most likely it's going to take 30. That's usually how it goes, right? So I personally prefer breaking those into smaller things. If it's a do it, okay, what's part of that do it? Well, I need to create this data script. I need to create a class to handle this thing. Of course, I need to write the tests that go along with that. I need to update the UI. There are things, and yeah, maybe this one thing here is going to take 5 minutes. This other thing here is going to take 10. But see that spelled out like that, and then you combine it into, say, 2-hour tasks or 4-hour tasks at the most. Anything above 4 hours, we're pretty bad at estimating, right? We are just bad. at estimating. So try to find something that works for you there. Of course, you have the Scrum board, which most people are familiar with these days, right? Where you have a column where you have the stories that you're working on, the features that the team is working on. You have a to-do where you have the tasks associated with each story. As you start working on a task, you move that task from to-do to the in process or in progress column. And whenever you're done, you move it over to the done. That way you have visual indication and you can see throughout the sprint what things are get done. If you have like too much work in flight, like everybody's starting on a new story and no story is getting done at the end, so the team has to keep an eye on that to say, well, if the stories are prioritized and we see that there's one story there that's stuck, let's all swarm into that story, do what it takes to, move it across the line, and then keep on going. And board is this kind of visibility. Okay, this is a good time to just take a little break. Walton, do we have questions there?
We do, Claudio. So first one, how often do you perform backlog grooming?
So how often do we perform backlog grooming? That varies from company to company, project to project. In some projects, I've seen that happening every week, every other week. I'm sorry. So if we do planning, for instance, on Monday, sometime mid-sprint, like on the second week, we have like a 1 hour or 2 hour session for product grooming. If the whole team is required to be in that meeting. There are organizations where backlog grooming happens outside of the team's work so that the product owner can be working with business analysts and with the business themselves and running user studies for the UX designers to create the assets, the mock-ups, the wireframes. And once they do that and they have a good direction as to where they want to go, then they present that to the team, right? So the team comes in to do like a technical review, for example, or even to think about, okay, for this thing that you guys are trying to do, given what we are doing right now, this is how big we think the story could be, just to give like a cursory sizing, not something that's like, oh yeah, it's going to take 30 hours. It's more like, okay, is this big or this big, right? And help the business shape what should be getting worked on next. So then again, that varies. Most of the teams, at least like every other week, we should be looking ahead. Some teams also or some POs like having at least 3 sprints worth of work ready, right? So that's if the PO gets busy with something and cannot do grooming, at least the stories are ready for the team to work on. So again, it varies based on the team needs, the organizational needs.
Well, thank you, and thank you for also explaining what it varies upon, and not just stopping there. So, yeah. Another question: how do you handle tasks that couldn't be completed in a particular sprint?
All right, those will roll over into the next sprint, right? So if a task could not be completed within a given sprint, it means that the whole story could not get done. So those roll into the next sprint, right? So, well, what happens to the tasks that did get completed? Well, those stay, right? Those were done. But then we move that over, we roll that over into the next sprint. Of course, we do need to bring that up during either sprint review or retro. It again depends on the team where they have this kind of discussion, but the question has to be asked, like, okay, why haven't we completed that task? It can be for a number of reasons. It can be, well, when we started working on that specific task, we unveiled things that we actually didn't think about. We've unveiled certain edge cases that we didn't discuss during planning. Nobody thought of it. And when we've run the question by the PO took a step back and said, oh, yeah, I have no idea. I need to go back and do some more research or whatever it is. Or maybe as you started working on that task, you had technical issues, whatever the issues. Maybe the server was down, maybe there was a software patch that messed up the environment, and now that one task that was supposed to be simple, it's actually impossible to do, by the end of the sprint. You roll it over. It's like work. You have to, more importantly, make sure that the team discusses why has it happened, not as a way to blame people, but as a way to prepare so that next time it's like, oh, we're not going to have a situation like this, right? So if it was because like there was a server down, okay, how do we prevent us from being stuck because of something like that happening in the future? There are many techniques that you can apply to that. So then again, not getting work done within a sprint, that's not the end of the world. The end of the world would be not to have the conversation, a good, clear conversation as to why did it happen, how can we prevent us from, falling into the same trap next time.
Excellent. All right, we got one last question, and then let's continue on. So,
right.
Louise asked, is it required for the product owner to be in the daily Scrum?
Yes and no. It varies depending on how the team works and operates. I've worked on teams where, yes, the product owner was in daily Scrum every day, mostly to just be there like right on time when the team has questions. And there were cases, like there were projects where like every day there was something that the team wanted to ask the PO for whatever reason. Right, so it's good to have the PO there because we take the question and out. But that's it. The PO is not there so that the team is reporting, like giving a project update to the PO. That's not the idea. The idea is for the team to have the conversation, right? And for the PO to be there to clarify whatever questions the team might have that day that could be blockers, right? So that works effectively well, as long as the product owner is not playing the role of a project manager. It's different kind of roles there. I've also worked in teams where the product owner didn't have to be in a daily stand-up because the team did a pretty good job during planning. All the questions were answered. The team knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing, right? They had a good hang on it. And then the sprint goes by, maybe on day 5 into the sprint, the team is having the daily Scrum. The PO is not there, but one member says, I have the following question, and I think this is a blocker. Well, if the product owner is, available, just call them into the room. If they are not immediately available, the Scrum Master will say, okay, that's a blocker for you. I'm gonna, go after and get the PO to make sure that, like, let's say that we are having daily Scrum at 9. I'll get with the PO and make sure that he or she is available at 9:30 so that we can tackle that question. Is that okay? Yeah, and then you move on. Of course, if that keeps happening, where like every other day we have to go and chase after the PO, well, guess what? You just make sure that the PO is available for that short span of time every morning. Adjust as you need. It's driven by what the team needs. If the team needs the PO every day, the PO should be there. If the team feels like, no, we have it, we know what we're doing, we're good, then no need. Let the PO go do the work of, working through the stories that are coming up in the upcoming sprints. Cool, that it?
Yeah, thanks, Claudio.
Not a problem. All right, so daily Scrum, of course, or daily stand-up, however you say it. Typically, the training wheels, how do we learn it? You stand up there, and let's talk about the standing versus sitting down. People talk about, what did you accomplish yesterday? What do you plan to accomplish to keep you from being successful, right? That's like the typical thing that you do. Now, let me tell you this. There was this one client, and this was a big lesson for me. A couple of years ago, I go into this client where I'm going to do some consulting with them. I go to their meeting room where they do daily stand-up. That's how they called it. They were referring to the meeting as daily stand-up, but I'm I'm there, like I'm standing at the corner of the room, and then I see, everybody bringing their computers, big mug of coffee, sitting down, and I'm already thinking in my mind, oh, I see, it's gonna be one of those. All right, okay, I guess not to be the oddball in the room, let me have a sit too. Now, what happened next was the big lesson for me. That Scrum Master had it nailed down. She made sure that the meeting did not go over 15 minutes. She flipped things around. Instead of doing, what did you accomplish yesterday? What do you plan on accomplishing today? What is keeping you from being successful? She would start with the last question. Do you guys have any blockers to be successful today? Period. Or question mark, actually. Why is that important? Because, look, the most important thing in a daily Scrum is to make sure that you have no blockers for the day. What happened yesterday, it's history. That it's done, right? So that's not the most important thing for today. What you're going to be working on, not as important as if you have blockers. If you have blockers, get them out of the way. Get them out, get them addressed, and then move on. So that's how she did, right? Which was like, does anybody have any blocker? If anybody in the team said, oh yes, I have this one thing that's it's a blocker for me. If the team could address that like within 20, 30 seconds, then there's no blockers. Hence why they had their computers. Because if a question came up or a blocker came up, they could quickly do a lookup and say, yes, this is the answer that you need, or here, it's fixed, boom. Oh, okay, great. Now, if it was something that's like, oh no, this is gonna take more time, the Scrum Master would say, okay, so who needs to be in that meeting? Joe, Mary, and Paul, okay? Do you guys have any time restriction today? And then she would take care of scheduling the meeting afterwards. Okay, now go. What did you do yesterday? What are you gonna be doing today? And I was there for 2 months. Not once I saw those scrums last more than 15 minutes. Every day like that. Like, okay, I'm blown away. Because again, the idea of having it as a stand-up is because people want to sit down, people want to be comfortable, people don't want to be just like standing there, so they tend to go faster in their communication. That's where the idea of having a daily stand-up came from. Now, if you're sitting, there's nothing wrong with sitting down if you remember why you were there. You are there to make sure that you have no blockers, that people are aware of what you worked on yesterday, because maybe the thing that you worked on yesterday, oh great, I can benefit from that work, which is going to make my plan for today successful. That's why we talk about, right? Those things. So those were like some big learns for me as of not too many years ago, actually, that's these realizations happen. Oops, my clicker thing is not moving. Here we go. Sprint review. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because I have a whole session dedicated just to talk about today at 4 p.m. So check it out, because the reason why I created this talk on sprint review is because there is this is one of the ceremonies that people don't normally get it tuned, because they refer to it as demo. Oh yeah, at the end of the sprint we have demo. If that's how you're referring to sprint review, you are not really understanding why we have sprint review, right? Sprint review, as a quick summary, is the place where we demonstrate and we deliver the value that we've built during the sprint, and we demonstrate and deliver that to the stakeholders, the people who we are building the thing for. And it may involve a demo, but not necessarily. Okay, there are other things that can be value, brought into the business, into the stakeholders' lives, that is not necessarily something that you're gonna like click around to demo. Okay, so make sure to check out that session at the end of the day if you're available and interested. But so in sprint review, quick bullet points there. The team describes the features completed, exceptions to the success criteria called out. So maybe there was a user story that we really planned on working on, and it just didn't work out. We couldn't like meet the success criteria there. So we call it out, like we recognize that had happened and why has it happened, right? Make sure it's it's supposed to be a transparent process. The stakeholders will provide feedback on the product, right? Most of them are likely seeing the thing for the first time. So, write down. And it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not just up to the PO to take note of that feedback. Every single team member should be taking their own notes, because every person will pick on a different thing or will internalize or different way. So having the team taking notes is very beneficial so that later they can discuss and say, okay, oh yeah, you picked on this thing. I didn't even realize that because I was busy thinking about the other feedback that we got. So work as a team, even through sprint review. Changes are made to the product backlog to prioritize or deprioritize work based on the feedback that we get. A release plan may be revealed, right? When do we plan to release this collection of features of user stories? So that all happens in sprint review. Definition of done is something that we talk about in Scrum, where, how do we know when a story is done? Because sometimes we say, oh yeah, I'm almost done with the story. It's done except for whatever. Well, if it's done, but not done, it's not done, right? So you have to just have one definition for done. When you say done, everybody understands. So for example, when do you know that a given task is done? There are many things, and each team will vary on their definition of done. So for example, is the task unit tested? Has it been code reviewed? Is it checked in? Right? Are there any other things to consider? Yes, this task done for good. It's not done except for, right? And there are other parts that you may also introduce definition of done. So you may do it at the task level. You may do it at the feature level. So at the feature level could be, has it been acceptance tested? Has it been acceptance tested on a test server? Has the performance of the feature been tested? What are the other things, right? Good. Do you have anything for me there?
Say 5-minute warning.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I told you I was going to be aware of the time. Then I start talking about these things and I get too excited. Right, so we identify definitions of done for the different things. It's not mandatory to have it on all of the parts, like the task, the feature, the release, right? The sprint, and then finally the release. It's up to the team together with the business to define, where should we specify those. Sprint retrospective, actually, my good friend Daniel is giving a talk just about retros, how to make your sprint retrospectives better. Please check it out. If you've been sitting in sprint retros where you're like, why am I here? This thing is so boring. I need to get out. I cannot stand these people. I cannot stand how they talk. The things of, what worked, what didn't work, how can we make it better? If you're getting bored by that, it's because the sprint retro there is not, again, properly tuned. So check out that talk, because a lot of the things that Daniel actually talks about in that talk, I also implement the same on the teams that I work with, and very successfully. So that's why I'm recommending. So sprint retrospective is the place where we get together to figure out, what do we need to improve, or what can we improve? 4 categories with people, right? Our relationships, the process, how we are doing things, the environment where we are working, immediately adopt the improvements for the next iteration, right? And keep iterating, right? And keep reflecting, okay, the things that we said we were going to change, has it worked? If not, Do we need to drop it, or do we need to just change it slightly to make it actually work? So there are many techniques for effective sprint retros. They are not, in my opinion, sprint retro may be like the most important meeting in Scrum, right? Because it helps you figure out where are we, and the thing about, the thing that got us here is not going to get us there. So how do we get there? Retro is the place that's going to allow you to surface the current state of the team and then help you move forward. All right, at this point, Walton, are there any questions before we wrap things up?
One question.
Sure.
So, Claudio, what has made the greatest impact on your success in implementing Scrum? Is there something you've learned?
Yes. Collaboration among all the people involved constantly, and the use of simple language. I'd say that's been the biggest thing. Because even though, yes, we are in the US, everybody's supposed to speak English. Well, not all of us speak English natively, first thing. Second, even if you were born in a country that speaks English primarily, the meaning that people have attached to a word may vary. So we are speaking the same language, but we are not on the same page. So for me, that was the biggest thing that has helped. When I started collaborating more with more people throughout the entire sprint, every single day, and making sure to find the language that works not just with the team, but with each individual. Like knowing each individual to understand, like I always bring this one up. I'm originally from Brazil. When somebody in a meeting draws in my mind, I don't see the same football that Walton sees. In my mind, the football looks like what in the US is called the soccer ball, right? So to me, the immediate meaning associated with the word football is different from the one from other people, even though it looks like I'm, speaking fluent English and everything, but the meaning, the vision that I have in my mind is different from other people in the room. So that realization to me was probably the biggest thing, making sure that the entire team has that vision, right? And working with the PO, because sometimes the PO will tell you, hey, look, this is the user story that we're working on. And the PO is like explaining what the story is, but explaining from a point of view that maybe members of the team are like, I don't quite see what you're saying there. I cannot have the same image, the same vision that you have in my mind. So that's been my biggest realization. Having for the entire team, PO, Scrum Master, development team, everybody has the same vision. When somebody says football, everybody has the same image. When somebody says a wall, everybody has the same image. Is it a wall for like a home office, for a tall building? Is it, you have to understand and have the same vision. That's been the biggest thing for me personally.
Excellent, Claudio.
Cool.
Nothing else. I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's session. And Claudio, thank you so much for sharing.
You bet.
The recording of this session will be available at HoustonTechFest.com soon. And we hope you guys enjoy the rest of virtual Houston Tech Fest. Everybody have a great day.